second vlog. Nice talaga mo vlog si Dean. Okay. Anyways, I'm here to discuss our next topic after the bioenergetics. Sabi nga natin, every metabolism, especially the stage 1 and the stage 2, will depend on the type of component that we intake. Kasi we will be talking more of how those molecules are being catabolized or metabolized in the body. Of course, I have to be safe on this. I must say metabolized kasi dalawa yung, di ba? There are two types of metabolism, which is your catabolism and anabolism. Okay, so we intake a large molecule and we digest it into small, we metabolize it into small molecule, and that's catabolism. And we those small molecules, as a result of the catabolism, will be made into a more complex molecule which will be used by the body. So actually that's the reason why we need to eat food. And that is also the reason why we should not at all deprive ourselves, especially when we are dieting, diba? You don't need to suppress yourself from eating, but you have to control the possible calorie that you intake. Okay, so it would be better if the energy that you need will be the only the exact amount that you will intake depending on the type of your activity, body activity. Okay, so right now we will discuss carbohydrates as the first component that is being we usually metabolize, okay, more often, especially the Filipino people, because we Filipinos are very much into rice. Yung rice kasi very rich in carbohydrates, and hindi natin alam bakit ba ang sarap-sarap niya kahit pa mataas siya sa carbo, wala naman siyang lasa, wala rin naman siyang kulay, no? Pero ang sarap niya kasing i-partner sa ulam or viand. I'm hoping that somebody will watch this other than my students from Calamba. There is this American that we knew, no? Tataka siya, ba't ang Pilipino ang hilig sa rice? Okay? So actually, kaya yung Pilipino like me, I just sexy. Okay? Anyways, to start with, we will be again discussing your carbohydrates. Take note that your carbohydrates is the most abundant organic compound in the environment or in nature. It doesn't necessarily mean that it is only present on the dietary products that we eat, but it is also present everywhere. Like for example, the plant, okay, meron silang sugar, they produce amylose, diba? The animals, for example, which has the glycogen, it's a polysaccharide. Both of those examples being said are polysaccharides actually. The trees, the flowers, and the bees. Let me tell you about the birds and the bees, no? And of course, our concern is the carbohydrates in humans. Our cellular makeup, our the food that we eat, no, and even the communication inside our body. Okay, later you will understand why, what am I speaking of. Okay, now just take note that your carbohydrates has certain function. So one of which is the storage of form of energy. So when you want to do a strenuous exercise, actually, pagka nag-aerobics ka or Muay Thai or Zumba. When I was in a previous university, I do boxing talaga. Nagtataka ako, I do boxing so that I can maintain yung... Dati kasi hindi ako ganito ka-sexy. Medyo sexy lang ako. So, I just wanted to just maintain yung ganong weight kasi yun yung recommended weight sa akin. So, I do boxing a lot. I do that so as to maintain my body tone and everything. Pero kasi, nakakainis kasi after the boxing, lalo na kapag meron kaming sparring, gutom na gutom ka. It's but natural. Pero you have to control yourself. Kasi, it's useless. You have burned so much of the calories, but you're eating double the calories that you lose. So, yun yung mahirap. So, kung mapapansin nyo, right after strenuous exercise, yung mga mayroong mga physical activities sa inyo, mapapansin nyo, mas gutom na gutom kayo right after that. But, sabi nga natin, self-discipline, self-control, kailangan kontrolin mo yung sarili mo para at least hindi masayang yung mga pinagpaguran mo. So, yun yung mga bagay na kailangan yung isipin. But, of course, requiring, hindi kayo matakaw. Sorry for the word. The takaw issue, hindi po. Okay? Now, maybe you are wondering, ngayong new normal, ang dami yung activities, ang dami yung iniisip, ang dami yung kailangang aturgahin, even if it is not a physical job, no? It doesn't require physical movement. Nafe-feel mo gutom ka pa rin. Tapos sabi mo, stress. You know what? Because using your brain, thinking of, the things, for example, in the examination, you almost burn 500 kilocalories. So, that's much. Ngayon, kung sabay-sabay kami lahat nagpa-activities sa inyo, tapos wala ka pang makitang makaka-copy-paste. Copy-paste talaga. Sanay na ako sa inyo eh. So, wala ka pang makikitang makaka-copy-paste. Pag-iisipan mo talaga yung mga cases na binibigay sa inyo. Ay talaga you will really need much of that energy. And you would really need much of those carbohydrates. Okay? So, your function of, sabi ko nga, form of energy, storage form of energy. So, carbohydrates, it is metabolized and turns into ATP upon entering the acetyl-CoA up to the electron transport system. Diba? Meron kang 32 ATPs that is being produced. And take note, ATP are energy carriers. Okay? Yun, lampas ang, okay. Tanong tinignan ko kayo pagkakalumpas ng lipstick ko. Okay, anyways. Now, what are the other functions of your carbohydrates? That would be an intracellular communication. An intracellular communication in some organisms. Okay, and also intracellular communication. Kasi the cell wall, for example, the bacteria, the cell wall, it contains sugar, and that sugar in the cell wall will actually communicate to other cells, okay? Or to other mechanism inside the cell. So, let's take for example your bacteria, which has a mannose, okay? Mannose, it's a sugar, okay? Yung mannose na yun, which is present in the cell wall, again, of the bacteria, can actually signal a certain pathway, no? That pathway being the complement pathway. So, meron tayong mannose binding activation, yung lectin pathway sa complement system. Okay? So, kapag meron kang bacteria and it communicated, kunyari, na-determine ng complement system, merong sugar doon, sugar ng bacteria yon, then I have to react, no? I have to protect my ground. Ganon, sabi ni immune system mo. So, what will happen is, it will trigger, because of the sugar, because of the mannose surrounding the cell wall of the bacteria, that will trigger the complement system. And triggering the complement system is actually your defense mechanism against those pathogens that have entered to your body. So, kapag communicate siya, of course, hindi niya kayang pigilan yung communication na yun. Pagka nagkaroon na siya ng signal, na-receive ni complement yung signal, magla-lyse na yun, magre-react na yung body mo, magre-react na yung immune system mo, tapos magla-lyse na yung, magla-lyse na po yung pathogen, yung bacteria. So, because of the presence of your mannose, okay? And also, actually, the sugar that you have, or the sugar, can be found in the cell membrane, and this could serve as an identification. Why? Bakit po? Kasi, take for example, the ABO blood group. Sorry. Did you know that the ABO blood group is governed by the presence of the sugar in the cell membrane? Type A, type B, type AB, and type O. Now, for example, if you're type O, if my memory is not playing on me, or if my memory is correct, ang type O, meron siyang sugar which is L-fucose. So, kapag ang sugar around your red cell is L-fucose, that's type O. Okay? So, same with type A, it also has a certain specific sugar. I don't want to mention the name, pero I know it starts with an N dash. I don't want to, to put something in your mind na hindi ako N-acetyl. Anyway, I'll just get back to you. No? And B also has certain sugar. And AB, of course, is a combination of the sugar present in the A and the B. So, yun. Isa yun. So, that will be one of the function of your sugar, okay, or your carbohydrates. Now, when an organism produces several carbohydrates, okay, ibig sabihin, maraming carbohydrates, and that product is actually called the glycome. Okay? Glycome po. Several, no? Maraming carbohydrates being produced, and then nag-compose na yung, nag-bind na yung, I have my script with me actually, sorry. So, nag-bind na yung mga sugars, then, which is produced by the organism, then you call that as a glycome. Okay? Now, how do we classify sugar? Okay, well, there are several classification of sugar, of carbohydrates. You can classify them into monosaccharides, that's simple sugar. Actually, lahat ng other types of sugar will start from the combination of monosaccharides. Okay, so you have your monosaccharide, that's one. You have your disaccharides. A disaccharide is a composition of two bound monosaccharides, okay? You have your oligosaccharides, and the oligosaccharides are actually composed of 3 to 9 monosaccharides combined together or bond together, and the fourth one being the polysaccharides. Polysaccharides will compose of 10 or more monosaccharides. Okay, so yung example of polysaccharides with glycogen, amylose. Okay, so take note that carbohydrates are naturally sweet. So, minsan, pag sweet si boyfriend, sweet si girlfriend, edi, wow, ang carbohydrates ka ng buhay ko. Ay, mga punchline, mga mete. Isa kang carbohydrates ng buhay ko. O, diba? Meron na. Now, what are the examples of your monosaccharides or simple sugar? You have the glyceraldehyde. Glyceraldehyde composed of 3 carbon atoms. Okay, so there are 3 carbons in the chemical formula. Okay, glyceraldehyde, 3 carbon atoms. Thus, you call it trioses. Okay. Erythrose having the 4 carbon atoms, you call that tetroses. Okay? You have your ribose, which is composed of 5 carbon atoms, and you call that pentoses. 5 pentoses. You have your glucose, which is composed of 6 carbon atoms, and you call that hexoses. Okay? You have your pseudoheptulose. The pseudoheptulose is composed of 7 carbon atoms. So you call that heptoses. Okay? And of course, you have your nonoses, 9 carbon atoms. And that 9 carbon atoms, an example of that is your uramic acid. Again, nonoses. Walang octoses eh. Nonoses agad. Okay? Now, yung sinabi ko, trioses, tetoses, pentoses, hexoses, heptoses, and nonoses, ang pinag-uusapan natin doon, yung number of carbon atoms, ha? Yung number of carbon atoms, yun yung pinag-uusapan natin. Okay? Now, also, you can classify monosaccharide depending on the carbonyl group na naka-attach sa kanya. Okay? So, there are 2 types. Meron kang aldehyde na carbonyl group at saka keto group. Pag aldehyde, ano yun? You call it aldoses. And pag keto, you call that ketoses. Okay? So, what is an example of your aldehyde? That would be your trio. Yung trios kanina, yung glyceraldehyde. It's an aldehyde. And you have your ketose, which is your dihydroxyacetone. So, that is a ketose. Okay? And take note that your carbohydrates, if it is attached to a free, again, if it is attached to a free carbonyl group, you add a suffix OSE, that's O's. Okay? Now, if it is in the keto group, no, the carbonyl group is of keto type, then you just have to add UL. So, for example, yung UL before the O's. Okay? So, kung carbonyl yon, edi O's lang. Okay? Pero kung ketose yon, or ang naka-attach na carbonyl ay ketone, edi lalagyan mo ng UL before the O's. Like, cellulose. Okay? Cellulose, yung ULOS. Okay? Except for fructose. Fructose is a ketose, pero wala siyang fructulose. Okay? So, fructose. Okay? So, sabi natin, in every rule, there will always be an exception. So, I just want to inform you that the bond that link your monosaccharides together is what we call the glycosidic bond. Again, the one that links your monosaccharide together is the glycosidic bond. Okay? Now, let's talk about isomers. So, when we say isomers, we have compound that have a same formula but have a different structure. Again, you have a compound with the same chemical formula but it has a different structure. So, halimbawa nito, fructose, glucose, mannose, and galactose. All of those 4 that I have mentioned have C6, so that's 6 carbon atoms, H12, that's 12 hydrogen atoms, and O6, that's oxygen, 6 oxygen atoms. Okay, so lahat yon, yung fructose, glucose, mannose, and galactose will compose of the C6, H12, O6. So they have a similar formula. Pareho sila. Yun na yun din. Kailang nagkaroon sila kasi ng what you call this? Yung placement of the attached hydroxyl group. Yun po yun. Okay? So, when we say, when a carbohydrate isomer differs in configuration, again, if a carbohydrate isomer, okay, we're talking of the isomer, then we're speaking of the different types of isomer. If that carbohydrate isomer differ in a configuration around only one specific carbon atom, you call that as your epimers. Again, kung meron kang carbohydrate isomer, they have, of course, when we say isomer, para-paraw sila ng chemical function, chemical formula. But, if they differ in the configuration in one carbon atom, isa doon sa carbon, parehong carbon atom pinag-uusapan natin, same carbon atom, only that, nagkaiba sila ng attachment. Okay? Then, you call that as epimers. Take note, your epimer is a diastereomers. Okay? Diastereomers. Mamaya papaliwan natin yung diastereomers na yan. Now, for example of the epimer, it will be your glucose and your maltose. Okay? Yung glucose nyo and maltose, as I have mentioned kanina, you have C6, H12, O6. Hindi po ba? Now, what makes the difference? What differentiates glucose from the maltose? It's on the fourth carbon atom. Okay? So, yung fourth carbon atom, yung hydroxyl group niya, kunyari, ganito ha, ganyan, nakaharap pa ganyan. Yung pag ganyan, diretso. So, C, 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 C. So, yung hydroxyl group niya, on the fourth, 1, 2, 3, 4. On the fourth, dito nakalagay sa side na to, yung hydroxyl group. And, your galactose, yung OH niya, dito sa kabila naman, naka-attach. Okay? So, both the OH is attached on the fourth carbon atom. They have the same chemical formula, only that the site of attachment, kung saang side, will it be this side or this side? If the OH on the fourth carbon is attached on this side, then this is your glucose. And if the OH is attached on the other side, then that would be your galactose. So, you call that as an epimer, ha? Tatandaan. Now, so, sabi nga natin, so I don't have to speak of the isomers, ha? Basta they have the same chemical formula for that matter. Okay? Now, let's now talk about your enantiomers. Okay. Just take note that your enantiomers are mirror images of a certain carbohydrates. Mirror. So, ako, ayan, ito. Ganito, nakikita ko sarili ko, assuming that my phone is my mirror. So, baliktad. Super dry. Yeah. Super dry. Baliktad siya. Pag hinarap mo, pag binasa mo dyan, baliktad din. So, that's actually what happens in a mirror image. So, harapan mo siya ng ganon. Ganyan siya. Okay. Now, it is actually, we're more concerned of the rotation. Okay? So, there are two types. You have the D and the L. The D will stand for dextrorotatory. So, rotation nga eh. Pag sinabi natin dextro, that's going to the right. So, it's on the right. Okay? And if it is L, that's levorotatory. And that will be going on the left. Okay? So, in human, what is more common is your D isomer. Again isomers can be classified into epimer and enantiomers. Okay? Epimer, there is the difference in conformational structure because of the placement of the attachment on a specific carbon atom, whereas your enantiomers are mirror images. So, just take note, kasi sabi ko kanina, so enantiomers, ito yung mirror image. Just kanina, yung epimers, you call them as diastereomer. Ito ha. What is the difference? Kasi parang, alam mo, inisip ko rin yan. Parang namang mirror image rin lang yung kasi ililipat-lipat mo rin. Pag pinagharap mo, di nakalipat din sa kabila. Hindi po. Yung pong enantiomers, they have the same property so that they have a same melting point and the same solubility. Whereas your your epimers, which are diastereomer, has a different properties. Okay, so they have different solubility. For example, glucose and galactose are epimers of each other, pero hindi ibig sabihin na magkatulad sila. They have a different melting point. They have a different solubility. Unlike your enantiomers, the D isomer and the L isomer actually has the same solubility and the same melting point. Okay, so yun lang po yung pinagkaiba po nun. Okay, now we go more into, dito medyo ang tagal ko rito sa part na to eh. Okay, by the way, to metabolize or to process your D isomer and L isomer, there are specific enzymes for each specific enantiomers. Again, to process your D and L isomer, there will always be a specific enzyme to process a specific isomer. If it is D, then it needs an enzyme specific for D. If it is L, then it needs a specific enzyme for L isomer. However, there is one enzyme that can process both the D and the L isomer. Okay? So, you call that isomerases. Okay? The isomerases can process both the D and the L. Okay? So, okay na tayo. Natingin ako sa aking script, sa aking coding. Ito na eh. Medyo kasi magulo tong cyclization. Okay. So, I would try to make this easier. Okay? So that it will be like piece of cake sa inyo. Simple lang. So, let me put this in a nutshell. When we say cyclization, okay, we want to make this carbohydrate molecule to be cyclic. And to be cyclic, it has to become a ring. Okay? So, your carbohydrates can be presented as a cyclic and cyclic. Okay. A cyclic, straight. It's an open, kumbaga. Nakita mo, letter C. Okay? Dapat pag ganun drawing ko, para letter C. Okay? C. It's open. Ayan, open. Pag acyclic, open. Pag cyclic, ring. Okay? Gets acyclic. Malito ng mata ni D. Cyclic. Okay. So, acyclic, cyclic will be ring. Now, actually, your sugar should be in the cyclic form. Para mag-bond siya, okay? So that it can bond with another sugar or with another carbohydrate. So, how your cyclization of carbohydrate happens, okay? How do we, how your carbohydrates forms a ring, okay? So, it will form a ring. Okay, let me just tell you. If an aldehyde is being cyclized na, okay, if your carbohydrates is, if the type of carbohydrates is an aldehyde being cyclized, you call that hemiacetals. Okay, hemiacetals. If the one that undergoes cyclization, the one that we want to be a ring, okay, is a ketose, then you term that as hemiketals. Okay? Ito ngayon yun. Bakit kailangan akong sabihin? Ang tanong, paano din yung C iikot na ganyan para maging cyclic, ring type. Okay? So, take note, that it could either be an aldehyde or a ketones. Okay? Both of those type of carbohydrates are actually electrophils. Now, cyclization of carbohydrates will happen when there is a presence of alcohol. Okay? Your alcohol, kung yung aldehyde mo, if your carbohydrates is electrophil, then your alcohol is a nucleophil. Okay, magkaiba yun ha. Electrophil, nucleophil. Pag sinabi nating electrophil, it is something that receives. Okay? It receives electron. Okay? So, it accepts electron. And when we say nucleophile, it is the one that donates an electron. So, it donates a pair of electrons. Okay. So, eto ngayon. And usually, the most common donor in the cyclization would be alcohol, the oxygen part. Okay. So, kunyari, ito yung aldehyde mo. Okay. So, this is an electrophil. And this is your ito pa ganyan. This is your nucleophil. Ito yung alcohol. So, ito yung a-attack dito sa inyong carbohydrates na acyclic. Okay? So, your nucleophil will donate an electron, no? And definitely, the reaction will be one of the electron will attack the other end of this nucleophil, and the other one, alangan na makipag-agawang pa siya rito. So, saan siya? Doon siya. Ay, ito na lang, ganito na lang. Ay, para masaya. So, ito yung nucleophil. Ito ha, electrophil, nucleophil. Tapos, nakita niya, ito na, may a-attacking na tayo. Dito ako sa baba. Yan. Ako, sige, dito ako sa taas. Then you form. Pero hindi ito kaya nga ganito ginawa ko kanina kasi magkahiwalay sila. Okay? So, pag nakakabit na to, okay? Kunyari wala to ha. Nakakabit na to, tapos kumabit na yun, magkakaroon ng interaction tong dalawa. So, sila yung magkakabit na ganyan. Then you form a ring. So, that's cyclization. Okay? So, what is important? Why do you think cyclization is important? So that one carbohydrate or one monosaccharide can attach to another monosaccharide. So that you can form disaccharides or oligosaccharides or polysaccharides. So, ganun yan ha. So, yun yung cyclization, and that is the most important part of your cyclization. Now, pwede po bang walang cyclization? Yes. Okay? So, pagka hindi siya nagkabit, wala siya, pagka ito kasi, ano ba itong sinasabi doon? May sinabi doon eh. Wait lang ha, I am trying to refresh my memory. Ganito. Kapag ka dito, talagang ang tagal ko nag-isip, no? Nakalimutan ko kasi. Basta ang point is, kunyari ito, cyclic ka na. If, ito pala, if, for example, this did not attach, no, to another, hydroxyl group of another monosaccharide. Kunyari napa-attach siya sa carbonyl group. May possibility siyang mag-open. Okay? At pag nag-open siya, it's a reducing agent, no? It has the capacity to reduce. So, therefore, you term that as a reducing agent. Cyclic siya, naging acyclic siya. Kasi hindi siya nag-attach sa another, usually kasi it's on the another hydroxyl group of another monosaccharides. Eh, ang problema mo, hindi siya nagkabit doon. Sa carbonyl group siya, so pwede siyang ma-open na gano'n. Maging acyclic. And, babalik mo siya sa dating form niya as acyclic, yung original, no. This will now become your reducing sugar or the reducing agent. Nataalala ko siya. O, yun. Diba? So, ganun yung proseso, ha? So, that's how you produce your reducing sugar. Okay? So, tinitignan ko kung anong page na tayo. Okay. Now, so usually, for example, your pentoses and the hexoses undergoes intramolecular cyclization. Okay? Teka lang diba mamaya may nakakalimutan ako. So, in intra, ito pala. Uy, ito, meron akong kodigo. Ito na pala. Okay, to reducing sugar. Ayun, tama si Dil. For example, you will produce a reducing sugar if the OH, let me read this just to be exact. You will produce a reducing sugar if the OH of the anomeric carbon of a cyclicized sugar is not linked to another compound by a glycosidic bond. If it is not attached to another OH group, hydroxyl ba yun? Oo, diba? So, if it is not attached to the OH group, then it can be open. And if it is open, you call it as a reducing agent. Reducing sugar siya. Meron ka narinig na bagong term, anomeric carbon. Yung anomeric carbon is actually the result of the intramolecular not molecular, molecular, intramolecular cyclization. Okay? Ibig sabihin, a product of cyclization na siya. Hemiacetal or hemiketals na siya. Okay, that's an anomeric carbon. You term that as anomeric carbon. Okay? So, when you have that, in an anomeric carbon, you have that carbonyl group, okay, becomes new chiral presentation. You call that your anomeric. Kasi pag nag-cyclicize na siya, maiiba na yung form niya. Iba na yung carbon, yung chiral carbon niya. So, that would be an anomeric carbohydrates. Okay? So, tinitignan ko lang, I just want to be exact. Okay. So, if it is a 6-membered ring, you call that pyranose. And if it is 5-member ring, you call it furanose. Okay? Again, sinabi ko na to kanina, glycosidic bonds. These are the bonds that connects one monosaccharide from the other. How does your glycosidic bond forms? It is because of the help of your glucosyl transferase. Okay? So, yun lang naman po ang kailangan nilang tandaan. The glucosyl transferase may process the nucleotide sugar. Example of that nucleotide sugar is your uridine diphosphate sugar. Again, the example of the dinucleotide sugar that will be processed by your glucosyl transferase to produce glycosidic bonds is your uridine diphosphate sugar. So, if the bond that is formed is attached to an azide, then you call that as N-glycosidic bond. Okay? If the glycosidic bond formed is attached to an OH, then you call that an O-glycosidic bond. Okay? So, let's now go to your dietary carbohydrates. So, we all know how your carbohydrates is being processed from the mouth. It will start the degradation into smaller molecules. For example, when you chew, you produce more saliva, and that saliva has your amylase, salivary amylase. Doon pa lang napoprocess na po yung carbohydrates mo, and then it goes down lower. In the pancreas, you produce an alpha amylase, which also will process the carbohydrates. And of course, you have your intestinal disaccharides. Okay? Intestinal saccharides enzyme. Okay? You have your isomaltase, which degrades the alpha-1,6 bond in maltose, okay, in isomaltose. And you have your maltase, which degrades alpha-1,4 bond of the maltose. Okay, so pwede po bang magkaroon ng sakit in the event na, opo, meron po tayong tinatawag ng intolerance, di ba? So, if you are deficient, usually kasi, ang problema mo, nagkakaproblema ka sa carbohydrates. Naku, umabot din ako ng 40, sorry. Ang problema mo, kapag umabot ka kasi ang problema sa carbohydrate metabolism, kapag meron kang enzyme deficiency. So, for example, sa lactose, di ba pag uminom ka ng gatas, nagtatai ka, may lactose intolerance ako, ayoko kumain yan. Kaya gusto mo ng ice cream, hindi ka makakain kasi may lactose siya. Bakit? Kasi you are deficient on a certain enzyme, which is lactase. So, ganun din to. Pwede ka maging deficient sa isomaltase deficiency. So, ano pong treatment doon? Ay, you just have to refrain. Wala nang ibang treatment. Wala ka namang pwedeng i-inject na enzyme. I don't know kung meron ng ganong technology ngayon na pwedeng i-inject. But, as to date, as far as my knowledge is concerned, parang wala pa. So, how do we diagnose this type of problems, yung mga deficiency? Now, we do the oral tolerance test. So, how do we go about the oral tolerance test? You will be given a certain compound if you're claiming that you are you have lactose intolerance, then you have to papainumin ka nila ng lactose, tapos itignan kung ano magiging reaction mo, kung makikita ba sa blood yun, kung ganun pa rin, hindi ba mamaproseso at magtatay ka, edi good luck. So, kung meron ka mga deficiency in specific sugars or specific carbohydrates, then therefore, yun yung magiging treatment mo rin. There will be a depletion or suppression of ano ba yun? Suppression. Wala na talaga. Wala na pong ibibigay. Or pwede naman kung meron din kasing instance na hindi naman totally wala kang lactase. For example, sa lactose intolerance. Kulang ka lang. So, pwede in a very minimal amount. So, control. No. Okay. Now, to sum it up, your carbohydrates will start as a monosaccharide, as a simple sugar. Okay? And how can you classify your monosaccharide? You can actually classify them as aldose and ketose. Aldose being an aldehyde, which is attached to an aldehyde group, and your ketose, which is attached to a keto group. And the aldehyde and the keto, or the ketoses, can undergo cyclization. In cyclization, we form a ring. So, when there is cyclization and the cyclization is over, you form an anomeric carbohydrates, okay? And that anomeric carbohydrates is attached to the OH group of another molecule or of another type of monosaccharide, okay? And this ring can still be open if it is not attached to another molecule. Then, therefore, it may result to become a reducing sugar or a reducing agent, okay? Now, also, you can classify your monosaccharides or your sugar into isomers, okay? So, isomers, as I have mentioned, you have the same chemical formula, and that an isomer can still be further classified into epimers and enantiomers. Enantiomers being the mirror images of one sugar, okay? The L and the D, okay? And of course, your epimers producing a diastereomers, okay? Take note. Enantiomers and diastereomers are different in the sense that they have a different property as to solubility and melting point. Tandaan, kapag epimers sa isang carbon atom, nagkaiba ang posisyon ng attachment ng OH. Okay? Now, also, of course, you can classify your carbohydrates into mono, di, oligo, and polysaccharides. Di, 2 monosaccharides combined together. Oligo, 3 to 9 monosaccharides combined together. And polysaccharides, 10 or more monosaccharides combined together. And for the dietary, of course, you have take note ha, ang ini-intake natin hindi monosaccharide. The more common type of carbohydrates that we intake from the food is the poly, oligo, and the disaccharides. Okay? Now, those can be processed, digested by the enzyme hydrolase. And I have mentioned to you several enzymes like the salivary amylase, the pancreatic amylase, the isomaltase, okay? And when this undergoes hydrolysis or being hydrolyzed or being processed by this enzyme, it will result in the production of your monosaccharides. And that monosaccharides will be absorbed in the intestinal mucosal cells. Okay? So, yun lamang po. Ano pa ba? So, yun lang, gusto ko lang i-remind kayo that most of the sugar are being, or most of the monosaccharide are absorbed in the upper part of the jejunum. And then, your glucose, and your glucose will be, siyempre nag-isip ako. And your glucose will be absorbed in the enterocytes with the help of the sodium ions. Okay? Yun yung SIG4. Carrier niya yun. Carrier ni glucose si sodium. Kaya, minsan, para ma-process yung sodium, para ma-absorb yung sugar mo, kailangan mo ng sodium. Ano ba yung mga nakalimutan ko sabihin sa inyo? Question. Can your carbohydrate, kasi pinag-usapan natin, one carbohydrates will be attached to another carbohydrates. Can your carbohydrates be attached to another molecule? Yes. It is definitely possible. So, yung attachment niya, it can attach to a protein, it can attach to a lipids. Okay? So, pag protein, glycoprotein siya. Pag lipids, usually, sama ba? Gusto mo, ano ba sample nun? Basta nadikit din siya sa fats. Okay. So, ayun. Ano pa ba? Yun lang naman po. Ang kailangan niya talaga. Pinili ko talaga magkasya. Okay. So, perhaps you will be asking din, paano yung mga sugar na yung sweeteners na kaya? Okay. So, I have here with me, syempre, sabi ko, nagda-diet ako. Hindi ako paid sa broso. Pero this is a chocolate. This is parang tablea de cacao siya. So, it contains 6 grams of carbohydrates. So, if you're on keto diet, sabi kasi nila, kapag ka nagki-keto diet, nababasa ko lang naman, at sabi rin ng mga naka-experience ng mag-keto diet, which I am doing also right now. Kasi malaki yung naitutulong niya sa akin in the control of my blood pressure. So, pagka nagki-keto diet ka, ang maximum allowable amount of, maximum allowable amount of your, kung tama ang pagkakaintindi ko, carbohydrates would be 21. Okay, 21 grams. So, 6 grams to, I can drink 2 cups of this. So, this is an example of carbohydrates. Tapos, siguro magtatanong kayo, hindi ako paid So, this is an equal. There are 2 types of equal. Hindi ko nadala yung isa. Yung equal gold at saka ito, equal classic. Ito pong equal, yung equal classic. Sabi niya, sugar ba to? Of course, I studied. Talagang in-assignment ko sa sarili ko. Aspartame to. So, hindi siya actually sugar. Okay? Sila kine-claim nila, aspartame. Wala siyang sugar. But, ayun na nalaman ko. Ito pala, may maltodextrin. No? So, yung maltodextrin, may content pa rin daw ito ng maltodextrin. So, may sugar pa rin siya. Hindi ko lang alam kung anong specificity. Hindi ko kasi nadala yung, basta yun, specificity niya. A specific amount of the maltodextrin that I don't know. Pero meron to. Sulfame to aspartame. As sweetener, nakalagay dyan, aspartame. So, the problem with this one is, if you have PKU, yung phenylketonuria, it can affect you. Okay? So, yan yung equal. Bakit meron si Dinito? Kasi nga, hindi ako diabetic, kaya lang kasi, keto diet nga ako. O, di ngayon, ito, dahil naubusan ako ng equal gold, ang ginagawa ko, ito muna, replacement pag walang equal gold. Tama ba? Basta ito, aspartame, hindi rin siya talaga pwede. Now, meron dito, ito stevia. The stevia, sabi nila, sugarless. Tapos nung binasa ko, yung stevia, may maltodextrin. So, meron din siyang sugar, di ba? Pero, ito tanga ng pagkakaintindi ko. Kasi yung process niya parang may konting amount. Kasi ito rin, meron din maltodextrin. So, may sugar din siya, hindi. Tapos ito, bayaran ako sa San Miguel. Ito, San Miguel, sugar-free. This one has a sucralose, no? Yung sucralose, actually, aksidente lang daw na-discover yung sucralose. Talagang pinaglalagay. Yung aksidente lang daw yan. Nalagyan daw ng chlorine, na chlorinated yata yung sucrose. Tapos, tinikman, biglang ang tamis-tamis, sobrang tamis niya. So, the sucralose actually is parang sa pagkakaintindi ka, it's from sucrose, but because of the addition of the chlorine, hindi na siya sugar, sucralose na siya. So, yun lang. Tapos dati, meron yung low and sweet, yung saccharin. Yung saccharin, yun yung low and sweet. Meron pang saan pa nga ba na-experience yung low and sweet mo? I don't know, Yung Splenda, okay yung Splenda. Basta meron pa akong nagamitan McDonald's yata na isang branch. I don't know, baka maganda naman sa akin ng McDonald's. Basta may isa na titignan nyo ha, yung mga binibigay sa inyo. If it is low and sweet na sweetener, do not use yung saccharin. Kasi sabi nila, it was somehow contributed to the formation of bladder cancer doon sa mga rats, no? Sa experiment rats. Kaya yung saccharin medyo tinanggal muna. Ito. Hindi pa tinatanggal sa market. Kasi basta wala ka lang PKU. Okay? Wala ka lang phenylketonuria. Then, pwede mo itong gamitin. Okay? So, talaga kompleto ako sa props, no? Para kakaintindihan tayo. So, yun lang naman po. Of course, I failed again to the challenge. Sabi ko, 20 minutes lang. Pero, sabi nga sa akin ni Ma'am Andy, hindi yan kaya ng 20 minutes sugar yan. Di lalo na ang glycolysis. Anyway, siguro next time, I will have to divide the part 1, part 2 para nakakapagod kasi pag tuloy-tuloy. Na, so, if you able to watch this video up to the end, then you'll get an extra point by sending your answer through the stream. Your answer to this question dun sa stream sa Google Classroom. Okay? The question is, what do we produce after cyclization? Okay? Again, what do we produce after cyclization? That's a bonus point. Napakadali. Katatapos lang ng ating discussion. So, yun ha. Kung pinanood mo hanggang sa huli to, may points ka. At ilalagay mo yung sagot mo sa Google Classroom stream, sa stream. Pagka nilagay mo sa ibang platform yan, not counted. Sa Google Stream, may point ka. Meron kang plus 3 points. Okay? So, have a nice day, guys, ahead of you. And I just hope that we could, or you were able to learn from what I have discussed. Although, it may be incomplete, pero that's the purpose why you have the book. Okay? See you soon and for the next topic, metabolism. Okay? Bye!